Living under strict HOA rules in Willow Creek meant I couldn't have friends over after 8 p.m., while the board members partied until midnight without any consequences. What would happen when my dad, a powerful construction director who oversaw every renovation project in our neighborhood, decided to teach them a lesson they'd never forget? The doorbell rang just as my friend Ethan was beating me at our favorite video game. I glanced at my phone. 8:15 p.m. Who could be visiting this late? When I opened the door, Mrs. Thompson stood there with her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't alone. Two other HOA board members, Mr. Collins and Mrs. Bryant, flanked her like bodyguards. "Your visitors need to leave immediately," Mrs. Thompson said, pointing to the cars parked in my driveway. Her voice was cold enough to freeze the summer air. "We've implemented a new rule: no visitors after 8 p.m. in Willow Creek Estates." I blinked, confused. "What? Since when?" "Since last week's meeting," Mr. Collins chimed in, adjusting his glasses. "It was properly voted on and passed." My friends appeared behind me, wondering what was going on. Ethan whispered, "Everything okay, man? Apparently there's a new rule about no visitors after 8. I explained, still stunned by the ambush. Mrs. Thompson tapped her watch. "It's now 8:17. Your friends need to leave, or we will document this as a violation." "But I never received any notice about this rule," I protested, feeling heat rise to my face. "All homeowners were emailed," Mrs. Bryant said, though she avoided eye contact. "The policy is designed to maintain the peaceful atmosphere of our community." As my friends reluctantly gathered their things, I noticed something that made my blood boil. 3 houses down, board member Mrs. Reynolds' home was lit up like a Christmas tree, with at least 8 cars parked outside and music playing. Her weekly book club, which everyone knew was really just a wine club, was in full swing. "What about Mrs. Reynolds' gathering?" I pointed down the street. "Seems like there are plenty of visitors there after 8. Mrs. Thompson barely glanced in that direction. "Board members are exempt when conducting community business." "Book club is community business?" I couldn't keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Don't make this difficult," Mr. Collins warned. "First violation is a warning. Second is a $100 fine. Third is $250. Beyond that, we can place a lien on your property." After my friends left, I fumed alone in my living room. This wasn't the first ridiculous rule they'd sprung on residents. Last month, they banned basketball hoops in driveways. Before that, they limited garden gnomes to no more than 12 inches tall. Each time, somehow, the board members were always exempt. The next morning, I called my dad. Richard Harper wasn't just any dad. He was the regional director at Harper Construction, the biggest building company across 3 counties. More importantly, his firm handled almost every major renovation project in our neighborhood and the surrounding areas. "They kicked my friends out at 8:15, I repeated. "Meanwhile, the board members throw parties whenever they want." Dad was silent for a moment. "This doesn't sound right. I'm coming over tomorrow to look at your HOA documents." "You don't have to, no," I said. "No, son, I want to. Besides, I need to check on the community center project bid anyway." When Dad arrived the next day, he brought a stack of materials about pending neighborhood projects. He spent hours poring over my HOA bylaws, making notes, and occasionally muttering to himself. "Here's your problem," he finally said, pointing to a clause. "New rules affecting resident property usage require 30 days written notice and a 2/3 majority vote of all homeowners, not just the board." Did you receive written notice? Did they hold a community-wide vote? No, just an email last week saying it was decided. Dad nodded slowly. They're not following their own procedures, but that's just the beginning of the problem. He spread out blueprints for the community center renovation, a $1.2 million project that would increase our monthly dues by 30%. His company was the primary contractor being considered. The board has been fast-tracking their own home improvement requests while delaying everyone else's, Dad explained, showing me application records he'd requested as a potential contractor. Mrs. Thompson got approval for her backyard renovation in 2 days. Your neighbor, Mr. Martinez, has been waiting 3 months for permission to build a similar deck. My jaw dropped. Can they do that? Not legally, and certainly not ethically. They're abusing their power. Dad gathered the papers thoughtfully. You know, Harper Construction doesn't have to bid on their projects. What do you mean? A small smile played on his lips. Sometimes people need to learn lessons about fairness the hard way. I think it's time for a little education. That evening, Mrs. Thompson knocked on my door again. This time, my college roommate Tyler had just arrived to stay for the weekend. "I believe I was clear yesterday," she said, glaring at Tyler's overnight bag. "No visitors after 8 p.m.
I was about to respond when Dad appeared behind me. "Good evening, Mrs. Thompson. I'm Richard Harper from Harper Construction." His voice was pleasant but firm. "I've been reviewing your HOA bylaws. Fascinating reading." Her expression changed instantly. "Mr. Harper, what a surprise! I didn't realize you were visiting." She faltered on the last word. "Just helping my son understand his rights as a homeowner," Dad replied smoothly, "including the requirement for 30 days written notice and a community-wide vote before implementing rules that affect property usage." Mrs. Thompson paled slightly. "Well, there are emergency provisions for safety issues." "Yes," Dad nodded. "Is having a friend visit after 8 p.m. a safety issue?" The board determined. "I'd love to see the minutes of that meeting," Dad interrupted, "as well as documentation of the community-wide vote. My son would be happy to waive the 30-day notice requirement if you can provide evidence that the proper procedures were followed." Mrs. Thompson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Finally, she managed, "I'll have to consult with the board." "Wonderful idea," Dad agreed. "While you're at it, you might want to review how project approvals are being prioritized. I noticed some irregularities that could be concerning to the State Housing Authority." After she hurried away, Tyler stared at me. "Dude, your dad is awesome. What just happened?" Dad chuckled. "Let's just say the board is about to discover that actions have consequences." I couldn't help but wonder what exactly Dad had planned and how far he was willing to go to teach the HOA a lesson about fairness. 3 days passed with no surprise visits from Mrs. Thompson or her HOA minions. My friends came and went freely, even after the forbidden 8 p.m. cutoff. But I knew this wasn't over. It was just the calm before the storm. "They're having an emergency board meeting tonight," my neighbor Emma texted me. She worked from home and had noticed everything happening on our street. Lots of angry faces going into Mrs. Thompson's house. Dad had returned to his office, but stayed in close contact. "Perfect timing," he said when I called to update him. "The community center bid deadline is tomorrow. I've been making some calls." "What kind of calls?" I asked, both nervous and excited. "Let's just say I've been chatting with every construction company, plumber, electrician, and landscaper who does work in Willow Creek Estates. We all feel the same about selective rule enforcement." The following evening, the HOA held their monthly meeting in the current community center, a dated building with squeaky floors and temperamental air conditioning. These meetings were typically attended only by the board and a few dedicated residents, but tonight was different. The room was packed. I slid into a seat next to Emma, who whispered, "Something big must be happening. Even Mr. Lopez from the end of the street is here, and he never leaves his house." Mrs. Thompson called the meeting to order. Her usual confidence was noticeably dimmed. "Before we begin our regular agenda, I want to address some confusion about the visitor curfew policy. After careful consideration, the board has decided to table this rule pending further community input." Murmurs spread through the room. I bit back a smile. "Now, moving on to our major item of business," she continued, shuffling papers nervously. "As you know, we've been planning the community center renovation. We expected to announce our contractor selection tonight, but there's been an unexpected development." Mr. Collins stood up, looking grim. "All 3 companies we shortlisted have withdrawn their bids. In fact, every qualified contractor in the county has declined to bid on our project." The room erupted in confused chatter. Mrs. Bryant raised her hands for quiet. "We've reached out to understand why, and the responses have been concerning. They've cited business discretion and scheduling conflicts, but it appears to be coordinated." "What does this mean for the renovation?" someone called out. "It means costs will likely increase significantly," Mrs. Thompson admitted. "The only bids we've received are from companies outside the county, with 30 to 40% higher estimates, plus travel expenses." A distinguished-looking man in the back raised his hand. I recognized him as Dr. Morgan, who lived in the largest house in the neighborhood. "I received an interesting call yesterday from Richard Harper of Harper Construction. He mentioned some concerns about how our HOA is being managed." Mrs. Thompson's face flushed red. "Mr. Harper has no authority to—" "Actually," Dr. Morgan continued calmly, "as a homeowner who pays substantial dues, I was troubled by what he shared. Selective rule enforcement, fast-tracking board members' home improvements while delaying others. These are serious allegations." Others began nodding and murmuring agreement. Emma nudged me. "Did your dad do this?" She just smiled. Mrs. Thompson tried to regain control. "These accusations are completely unfounded. Now, regarding the community center—" "I'm not finished," Dr. Morgan interrupted. "Mr. Harper explained that our bylaws require fair and equal treatment of all homeowners. He also pointed out that construction companies have the right to decline projects if they believe a client acts unethically." The meeting dissolved into chaos as homeowners started sharing their opinions. Homeowners began sharing their own stories of unfair treatment. Mrs. Gonzalez described waiting 6 months for approval to paint her front door, while board member Mrs. Reynolds painted her entire house without any apparent review process. Mr. Singh detailed being fined for having his mother visit for 3 weeks, classified as an unauthorized tenant, while Mr. Collins' in-laws had lived in his guest house for over a year. As the complaints mounted, I noticed Mrs. Thompson frantically texting on her phone. Minutes later, she approached me. "Your father," she hissed, "he's behind this, isn't he?" I maintained my composure. Behind what? Contractors making business decisions, homeowners sharing their experiences. Tell him we need to talk immediately. "I'll pass along the message," I replied coolly. But Dad mentioned he's booked solid with projects in other neighborhoods for the next 6 months. Something about communities that respect their residents and follow their own rules. Mrs. Thompson's face contorted with fury and panic. "Do you understand what you're doing? Without these renovations, property values will stagnate. The community pool needs repairs before summer. The security gate system is outdated." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "It's not about the projects, it's about fairness. Maybe it's time the board understood that too." Just then, the community center's air conditioning unit made a dying groan before shutting off completely. Hot, stale air immediately began to fill the room. "Perfect timing," Emma whispered, fanning herself with the meeting agenda. Mrs. Thompson struggled to maintain order as the room grew uncomfortably warm. "We'll take a short recess and reconvene in 15 minutes to discuss alternatives." As people filed outside for fresh air, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "How's it going?" "Better than I expected," I typed back. "The entire HOA board is melting down, literally and figuratively." "Good," he responded. "Remember, we don't want to hurt the neighborhood. We just want them to play fair." Standing under a shady tree, I watched Mrs. Thompson huddled with the other board members, gesturing frantically. They kept glancing my way with a mixture of anger and desperation. I wondered if they truly understood yet what power they'd abused and what power they were now facing in return. Would they make the changes needed to restore fairness to our community? Or would Dad need to take his lesson to the next level? A sharp knock at my front door woke me early Saturday morning. The digital clock read 7:15 a.m. Who would visit at this hour? I opened the door to find Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Collins, and a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. "Good morning," Mrs. Thompson said with a forced smile. "May we come in? We have an urgent matter to discuss." I reluctantly let them enter, wishing I'd had time to brush my teeth or change out of my pajamas. "This is Jeffrey Palmer," Mrs. Thompson introduced the suited man, "our HOA attorney." The lawyer stepped forward, extending a business card. "I understand there's been some interference with the HOA's renovation projects." I crossed my arms. "I don't know what you're talking about." Mr. Palmer cleared his throat. "Mr. Harper, we have reason to believe your father is orchestrating a contractor boycott against Willow Creek Estates. This could constitute illegal interference with business relationships and possibly restraint of trade." "My dad makes his own business decisions," I replied calmly, "and apparently so do all the other contractors in the county." "We're prepared to take legal action," the lawyer continued, "both against Harper Construction and against you personally for encouraging this situation." My heart raced, but I kept my face neutral. "On what grounds could you possibly sue me?" "Tortious interference," Mr. Palmer said smugly, "and we'll seek an injunction requiring Harper Construction to fulfill its existing contracts." What existing contracts? I asked. Dad never signed anything. He just declined to bid, which is completely legal. Mrs. Thompson stepped closer. We don't want it to come to legal action. We're willing to compromise. I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. We'll officially rescind the visitor curfew, she offered, and in return, your father resumes normal business with the HOA. That's not enough, I replied. The curfew was just one example of unfair treatment. What about all the other homeowners whose project approvals were delayed while board members got special treatment? Mr. Collins' face reddened. You're in no position to make demands. I pulled out my phone. Actually, I think I am. Dad suggested I record all our conversations from now on. I pressed the voice memo button. So, Mr. Palmer, you were threatening to sue me? The lawyer's eyes widened. I wasn't threatening. I was outlining potential legal remedies. Sounds like a threat to me, I said. I wonder what the State Bar Association would think about lawyers intimidating homeowners for exercising their rights. Mrs. Thompson snatched a paper from her folder. We've prepared a reasonable compromise. Read it. The document outlined a minor revision to the approval process, nothing that would create real change. I handed it back. Not good enough. Dad suggested these terms instead. I retrieved the paper he'd emailed me. First, all current board members step down. Second, a new election with independent oversight. Third,
A complete audit of all HOA finances and approval decisions for the past 3 years. Absolutely not, Mrs. Thompson exploded. Then I guess we'll see how long Willow Creek Estates can function without contractors, I shrugged. The broken AC at the community center was just the beginning. Summer was coming. Pools needed maintenance. Sprinkler systems broke. The lawyer whispered something to Mrs. Thompson, whose face showed a mix of fury and defeat. We need time to consider this, she finally said. Take all the time you need, I replied, opening my front door. But you should know Dad's talking to the county commissioner's office on Monday about potential HOA oversight regulations. After they left, I immediately called Dad. They brought a lawyer to threaten me, I said. I figured they might, he said calmly. Don't worry, my company attorney already reviewed everything. We're on solid legal ground. They're not. That evening, news spread through our neighborhood text chain that the community pool would remain closed due to maintenance issues. The timing wasn't accidental. Temperatures had hit 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and families had planned weekend pool parties. My doorbell rang again. This time it was Emma and 4 other neighbors I barely knew. Is it true? Emma asked. Are you the reason the pool is closed? I invited them in and explained everything. The unfair curfew, the selective enforcement, my dad's response, and this morning's threats. So they're punishing the whole neighborhood because they can't bully you? Said Jeremy, a young father whose twins had been excited about swimming. That's how they operate, I explained. They use community amenities as weapons. What can we do? Asked Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly resident. My grandchildren are visiting next weekend. They look forward to the pool all year. A plan formed in my mind. What if we hold our own meeting? Not an official HOA meeting, a community gathering. We could invite everyone except the board. Emma's eyes lit up. My backyard can fit at least 30 people. I'll host. I'll bring drinks, offered Jeremy.
"And I'll bring my experience," added Mr. Finch, a retired lawyer I hadn't met before. "I've dealt with HOA disputes in my practice for decades." As they left to spread the word, my phone buzzed with a message from Dad. "County inspector, friend of mine, is visiting Willow Creek Estates on Monday. Mentioned concerns about the community center's fire safety compliance. Might need to be closed until violations are addressed." I smiled. The pressure was building, but which side would break first? Emma's backyard buzzed with angry voices as nearly 60 neighbors crowded under her patio awning and spilled onto the lawn. People I'd never spoken to introduced themselves, each with their own HOA horror story. Mr. Finch, the retired lawyer, quieted the crowd. "Folks, I've reviewed your HOA bylaws, and I can confirm they've been operating improperly for years. The good news is you have options." He explained that state law allowed homeowners to force a special election with signatures from just 25% of residents. The crowd murmured with excitement. "Additionally," he continued, "the board must make all financial records available to homeowners upon request. If they refuse, you can file a complaint with the state housing authority." People began signing the petition immediately. I watched in amazement as neighbors who had never spoken to each other bonded over their shared frustration. My phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "This is Evelyn Bryant from the HOA board. We need to talk privately. Not everyone on the board agrees with Mrs. Thompson's methods." I slipped away from the meeting and called the number. "Thank you for calling," Mrs. Bryant said quietly. "Mrs. Thompson doesn't know I'm contacting you. Things have gotten out of hand." "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "The board is split. 3 of us want compromise. 2, Victoria and Harold Collins, refuse to budge." Her voice trembled slightly. "Victoria's husband owns Palmer Property Management, which handles maintenance for all HOA facilities. The company bills at premium rates, and the board never sought competing bids." My jaw dropped. That's a clear conflict of interest. Exactly. And there's more. They've been using HOA reserve funds for personal projects, labeling them as emergency repairs. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She sighed. "Because I'm tired of being part of something corrupt. And honestly, I need my patio repaired before my daughter's wedding next month, and no contractor will return my calls now." I couldn't help laughing. "So this is partly self-interest." "Partly," she admitted, "but also because it's the right thing to do. I have documentation, bank statements, invoices, meeting minutes with the real decisions that were made, not what was reported to homeowners. Would you be willing to share those at our community meeting?" There was a long pause. "Yes, but I'll need assurances." Back at Emma's house, I quietly pulled Mr. Finch aside and explained the situation. His eyes widened at the mention of financial irregularities. "This changes everything," he whispered. "If they've been misappropriating funds, they could face criminal charges." Mrs. Bryant arrived 30 minutes later, clutching a thick folder. The crowd fell silent as she approached the front. "My name is Evelyn Bryant."
"I've been on your HOA board for 3 years," her voice shook, "and I need to apologize for what we've done." One by one, she displayed financial documents on Emma's projector screen. The evidence was damning. Inflated maintenance contracts with Mrs. Thompson's husband's company, personal renovations classified as community expenses, Selective enforcement designed to generate fine revenue from certain homeowners. The visitor curfew, Mrs. Bryant explained, was specifically targeted at younger homeowners who entertain more frequently. The goal was to generate fine revenue. The crowd was stunned into silence, then erupted in angry shouts. Mr. Finch restored order. "We have enough here for legal action, but litigation takes time and money. I suggest we use this leverage for immediate change." Just then, a black SUV pulled up in front of Emma's house. Mrs. Thompson stormed toward the backyard, her face twisted with rage. "What is this?" she demanded, spotting Mrs. Bryant at the front. "Evelyn, you're conspiring with them. It's over." "Victoria," Mrs. Bryant said calmly, "we've shared everything." Mrs. Thompson scanned the crowd, her eyes finally landing on me. This is all your fault. Your father destroyed our renovation plans, and now you've turned my own board against me." I stepped forward. "No, Mrs. Thompson, you did this to yourself when you decided rules only applied to some people." Mr. Finch approached her with the petition. "We have signatures from over 50% of homeowners calling for the board's immediate resignation and a new election. We also have evidence of financial impropriety that we're prepared to share with the district attorney." Mrs. Thompson's composure cracked. "You can't prove anything." Actually, my father's voice came from behind her. He had arrived silently and stood watching from the gate. "They can prove quite a lot, and the county commissioner is very interested in establishing new HOA oversight regulations. They might even name them after you, the Thompson Rules." The fight seemed to drain out of her. "What do you want?" Dad stepped forward. "The same thing we've all wanted. Fairness, equal treatment for all homeowners, financial transparency, and, yes, the current board's resignation." 3 weeks later, I sat in our newly air-conditioned community center watching the election results for the new HOA board. Dad had kept his promise. Once Mrs. Thompson and her allies resigned, Harper Construction immediately resumed work on all pending projects. The community pool reopened within days. Emma won a seat on the new board, along with Dr. Morgan and 3 other neighbors committed to transparency. Their first official act was to establish a community oversight committee for all rule changes and project approvals. As the meeting concluded, Dad leaned over to me. "You know, I'm proud of how you handled this. You didn't just fight for yourself, you fought for everyone." I watched my neighbors chatting happily, planning a community barbecue for the following weekend, with no curfew for visitors. "I learned from the best," I told him. "Sometimes you have to stand up not just for what's fair for you, but what's fair for everyone." Later that evening, as I helped Emma prepare for her first board meeting, she asked, "Do you think Mrs. Thompson learned anything from all this?" I glanced down the street where moving trucks were parked outside the Thompson house. "Hard to say, but I know one thing for sure, our community did." That night, for the first time in months, I invited all my friends over for a game night. We played and laughed long past 8 p.m.